This is the Ring of Honor, a.k.a. Shane T, boy, the baddest champion you ever seen, boy.
This is Mr. Anderson.
This is good old JR Jim Ross, and you are listening.
You're listening to Knockouts and 3 Counts.
Cover! We got a new world champion!
That might be one of the craziest knockouts I've ever seen in my life.
Knockouts and 3 Counts is the podcast, baby! It's the real deal, baby!
Knockouts and 3 Counts starts now.
Ooh, what up, though? It is another Thursday. This is Knockouts and 3 Counts, and Kara's screen has gone black. Oh, no! It wouldn't be us. It wouldn't be us. We were totally good for, like, the whole pre-show. We will have Kara back here in 1 second, but that's correct. We are joined by Kara K.O. Rowe, fresh off of her return to the ring this past Friday at Motor City Casino. There we go. that wouldn't be us without some BS happening. We've got Kara Rowe back. I was just giving people a background on what you were doing this past Friday and your big return to the ring.
Yeah, I mean, it was that was big. I mean, 11 years. I think for me, it wasn't even everyone was talking about ring rust and people were talking about my age, and I was like, I wasn't worried about any of that. It was more, I've coached so many people. I've been coaching for 20 years, and it was so much pressure. Like, all these things that I've told all my athletes to do, if I don't do them in the ring, they're going to roast me. It was going to be terrible.
You know, there's going to be that one person like, look, you misstepped. You led your lead foot off this way. You tell me every time we're in there to watch I could only imagine that kind of pressure.
Honestly, that's all I was thinking about is I better pull off some of these things that I've shown them that actually work in the ring, because if I don't do them, they're not going to buy into it and going forward.
Well, I mean, Daron was front and center, you know, for those of you guys who have been following along with us for a little while. You guys have saw the episode with Daron and him telling us all about Toro MMA and all that good stuff. But, yeah, man, that had to be quite the role reversal for him to be in your corner going into that fight, too. I mean, you had him and Anthony Barnes in your corner for that. So how was that for you, having to be on the opposite side for a change, huh?
Oh, I mean, they just loved yelling at me and telling me to do more and telling me to suck it up, and everything that's come out of my mouth and I've spewed at them, they really threw it back at me, you know? But it was awesome because I'm so close. Like, Daron and I have been together for over 10 years. We've traveled all over the place. I've been in Japan a couple of times, all over the States. And so we have a really, really close bond. He's basically like my little brother, and he got to big brother me for this training camp, and we sparred quite a bit. And I think he just loved punching me for all these times that I really put him through the ringer.
I can only imagine, and I mean, those sparring sessions would have to be fun because I've seen, I've been there for some of the sparring sessions over there at MTT. So, like I said, that would have been something to see in and of itself. But before we get to training camp and all this stuff with this fight, I mean, like you said, you know, you've been gone for 11 years from the ring. You know, I mean, tell me about that. What prompted your return? Why now? And what made now the right time?
You know, I've been thinking about it since I stopped. And for most people know, I stopped because my spouse passed away. We had a 4-month-old. So my only focus was taking care of her and making sure that I could, you know, make money and support her. And so women's boxing, you know, obviously at the time you do it because you love it and you love to compete. It wasn't about, you know, the Benjamins. You're definitely we're looking at a lot of those. So it was really like I had to refocus. And I mean, a lot of people had said, oh gosh, I saw people online that didn't know me, and she's been inactive for 11 years. And I'm like, if you've seen, you know, a lot of the pad work or coaching I've done, I've still been in the game, whether I was announcing or commentating or coaching, I've still been in it. I've wanted to come back. I mean, multiple times. I literally have had my mouthpiece in my purse this entire time. Like, it's been 11 years.
Just in case, I'm always ready.
I literally was always ready. I remember just thinking, like, what if I go to a fight and a fight drops out and they need someone? I remember thinking, like, I'm just going to step in.
What a story that would be, right? You just step in for it. I got my mouthpiece in my purse.
Well, I did a couple of years of underground fighting. So I had about 200 fights that way too. And And these underground fights where it could be a girl that was 200 pounds. I mean, I had fought pro football, female pro football players. I mean, it was just random. So I always had to stay ready just to be sure. But this time around, it was timing. Like I really wanted to do this. I finally got my work visa, which is, as a Canadian, it's a nightmare to go through the process to get over to the States. And I've always loved America since I was young, because for me as an athlete, that's a place that celebrate athletes and give athletes a lot of opportunity. So I wasn't a male hockey player, so that made things a little tougher in Canada. So once I got my papers, and then I was training a lot and working with a lot more fighters. And it sounds strange, but I went to Poland for a fight, and we went to Auschwitz, right? And you go experience the concentration camps. And after that, I was like, read so much history on, Hitler and all the concentration camps and World War II. And I just got so ingrained in it. And I remember thinking that every excuse that I'm making to not fight feels so ridiculous when you read the stories of these people, right? And what they went through. So it kind of just changed my perspective. So anytime I was making up some excuse, and I think a lot of it stemmed from fear, because I had a good reputation. What if I come back and I suck up the joint, right? Like or I come back and I just don't put on a good performance, and I have all these people looking up to me, and it's hard enough to be a female coach, to have that reputation as a female coach. And if I did anything to ruin that, I mean, there was I think a lot of fear surrounding that. And then finally I just stopped making excuses, and I just said, let's pull the trigger. Let's go. I'm ready.
I like it. Go ahead, Corey.
Just very interesting mindset for sure. I mean, whenever you see something like that, where someone or something has, went through some type of struggle to lead you to a moment of inspiration like that, you got one life, you might as well live it. And if that's what the thing that makes you feel as though you're living is being in that ring, then, pursue that dream,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I remember reading a book when I was younger too. I read a lot of motivational books, but the one was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. And it was like, I kept having that mindset. And I was listening to, through COVID, there was a bunch of different shows on. And I remember just thinking, like, we have kind of this inner voice that tells us why we're not good enough, or we can't do this, or why we shouldn't do this. I mean, you have the outside people, and when you absorb it, like, oh, this person's too old, or this person's this. And every time that negative voice came in my head, I like switched it up to like, no, you can do this. Let's go. You can do this. And I just started drowning out the negativity, and I started drowning out any of the fear-based verbiage that was going on in my brain. And everything just shifted, and all of that kind of dissipated, and I felt ready to go.
It's kind of like, I can jump in the deep end, man. See what happens. You'll learn to swim. You got to stay afloat. That's just how it goes. You fear it all, and then once you start going, it just goes away.
Yep.
Just how it is.
Well, you led right into what I was going to say anyway. I mean, sitting there with, another guy that's trained with you as well, our buddy Ethan and Jason Wechter were sitting with me. I mean, the one thing that jumped out to me right away is you can always see, like, with people like you who have been fighting for a long time and those that have fought at that elite level, because even with you being away from the ring, the one thing that jumped out right away is whenever you were getting into the exchanges up in close, you could see the differences, how you were stepping your head off center line, which I've had you tell me 100,000 times, keeping your head off center line when you're coming in, how you're avoiding the shots, how you were, rolling with the punches off of the ropes. Like, there were little things that you could see once you started to catch your groove after you got into, I'd say about round 3 or so. You could see you're kind of like, okay, this is like riding a bike. When you got in there, how much did it matter the opponent? Like, when you were getting in there, was there a lot of thought put into who you were going to fight? Or, once you got the name, did you do a lot of like study on your opponent, or was it just, it doesn't really matter, I want to get back in the ring, this is more for me?
This time I completely did the opposite I would normally do. Like in previous times, I would look her up and I would study her and I would know what she was going to do. This time I didn't look up anything. I just said, get me who you can get me, because 3 girls turned it down. So I was like, get me who you can get me. I don't care. I went back to kind of my underground mentality, where it was like, you didn't know if you were going up against Shaq or, someone of that nature. So I I feel like that's better for me because then I just do me. Like, I feel like when you get so invested in what they do, then you're kind of focused on, okay, when she does this, she usually does this. If she doesn't do it, then you're sitting there in a staring contest, right? So you get so worried about them that you stop focusing on you. And I was like, if I do what I can do, she's not going to be able to handle me regardless of what she brings to the table. And I knew I had the ability to adapt. And again, you mentioned my corner, like Daron Cruickshank. He's been in crazy battles. I mean, he's a legend in the UFC. Anthony Barnes, undefeated professional athlete, trained at Kronk like myself. I coached him. You know, we had our last fight together. So I knew I was in good hands. So even if I had to make those little adjustments, I would be able to do so with my background and with the people that I had in my corner.
It's got to be such an interesting. It's got to be such an interesting dynamic from them guys too, being that you have trained them for so long and stuff, and to flip that role. Was there any different advice that you could tell wasn't necessarily a gem from you, I guess you could say, that was given to you during the fight, if that makes any sense?
No, it was actually advice from outside my corner. So like there was someone yelling from behind my corner trying to give me advice, and it was like, I remember thinking like, that's terrible advice. I want to just stop and be like, bro, that's like the worst, right? So I mean, because these guys, that's why I stuck with them. I had gone, I thought, well, it should be in a boxing gym. I started out in a boxing gym, but it just stylistically wasn't for me. It wasn't like how I fight. And the guys that I trained knew how I fight because I trained them very similarly. So it was actually the outside that I had to block out the outside noise, because it was like, the one suggestion was like, move forward, jab through her, keep going forward. I'm like, she likes to plant and fire heavy. And I'm like, so you want me to go into like her only option to hit me? No. So yeah, I think that was the only thing. I think my corner did great. Like, that was really Darren's first time in a boxing corner, but he's been around this since he was 4. So I had so much confidence in them and what I knew that I was like, this was the best I ever felt. I mean, the infusion of MMA for me, because I do pads with Daron and we punch and kick, and I even throw kicks at him and we throw elbows, and I just kind of felt like whatever I saw in there, like that kind of stuff turns you into like a gangster. Because when I do pads, I have to say to myself, I'm going to kick him and I know I'm getting killed, but just go do it. Like, screw it, go. And it's like a different mindset, where before I was so calculated when I boxed, like a technician, whereas now I've got that little bit of gritty grime, like gangster from MMA, I feel like, because it's a different mentality when you go in there.
She's got that dog in her.
Yeah.
That all the time, man. She got that dog.
Yeah, it was always good. Like, I know my coach, when I was at Kronk, he was always, he loved when I would get hit, because that's when it was like, yeah, let's go. Like, I was so competitive. But this is like, I don't need to be hit anymore. I'm just like, I just like to go in there and get it. And if you notice, like in the fight, it seems really quick, right? So when I was fighting before, we were 3-minute rounds and 8-ounce gloves. So you get, I'm dropping people, stopping people, you're doing all this. And then they changed, bigger gloves, shorter rounds. So you end up getting into a lot of toe-to-toe mixes that maybe normally you wouldn't, but you're like, I only have 2 minutes to do what I need to do. Like, even when I dropped her, it was like the bell rang 10 seconds later, instead of me having an additional minute to finish her off. So it's kind of a little bit stylistically different too, having these shorter rounds and having to kind of like tough man contest it, where you're just going,
How many of your fights before you took hiatus were at the 2-minute rounds?
Well, after, like, I won my titles in 2004 and 2005. Some people listening are probably born then, but so it was it was basically like the day of my title fight in 2005. They said to me, "Oh, hey, Kara, we wanted to let you know Michigan has changed to 2-minute rounds of 10-ounce gloves." And I was like, "What? Like, stop!" I mean, it was like it's so different, right? And so that changed then, and then I had a few more fights after. But I had a serious back injury. So I'd fight, have 3 years off, fight, 3 years off. And so this was like different, where I was actually able to train. I had a couple injuries, as we all do, going into fights, but I was able to like focus on the 2 minutes instead.
I always wanted to ask about that because, there's been a lot of talk about that with Amanda Serrano, with her, going with Jake Paul and all this and, the 2-minute rounds versus the 3-minute rounds. And that's always something I've wondered about because, like, when I got to box, obviously they were the 3-minute rounds, and I couldn't imagine because that would pretty much like eliminate, like, man, if you're a slow starter in a 2-minute round, man, like, shit, you got to get busy that last minute. Like, it's gonna be, it's gonna be just you got to go pedal to the metal that did it change? Does it change much of like? Do you think that hurts? Is that why women's boxing doesn't get like a lot of the spotlight, you think, because it stops it from a lot of the finishes you'd see maybe?
Well, I think that's where people fail to realize, like, say, Clarissa Shields, right? She's your 2-time Olympic gold medalist. Right. She's killing it. And people get on her about like knockouts and stuff. And you have to understand she's fighting girls at her level. Like, they're not at her level, but they're, up there and they're competitive, but she only has 2 minutes to do this. And she has like a boxing style. I remember her when she was itty bitty. Like, I remember her when she was a kid coming to all the shows and things like that, and she was like just so like invested in boxing. Like, she just would watch and she was taking it all in. And, people do get on her about not having a high knockouts and knockout ratio. And I'm like, I keep trying to say, I'm like, you guys don't understand, like 2 minutes is a different game. Like 10-ounce gloves is even different. The first time I put 8s on, I was like, oh, they were like mittens. I couldn't wait. I was like, this is serious. I'm going to catch a case with this. Like, I'm going to kill somebody. And so, like, it's very different. Like I said, I dropped my girl, but 10 seconds later, the bell rang. So had I had another minute, how different is that? Right. So, I mean, a lot of the women, like, people aren't understanding it's fast and you don't get to work how a guy gets to work, where you're moving and you're setting up. It's like you want to play chess, but you're stuck in this checkers, right? Where you're just like, I got to go, got to get more shots off because I don't have the time to work. So it's a different game completely.
It's got to play a factor on like game plan for boxers, man, because you're really smashing your game plan into 2 minutes worth. And like Kyle said, if you're a slow starter, you probably ain't getting started till a good 2-3 rounds in, 2 minutes apiece. That's kind of it's got to throw the game plan off, I would think.
That's a really good point. Like you said, like people that are slow starters or someone who maybe are tired after the first couple of rounds and they want to bank around, take a round off and basically jab and move. It's like you don't even have time to do any of these things. And I think for me, even in this fight, I probably went toe to toe a little more than I should have. Like I could hear my old coach, he's passed now, but voice like from Kronk. I mean, he was 94 and I remember when I see him in the hospital, he had a few stomach surgeries and he woke up and he looked at me and he just went, ugh. And I was like, oh my God, Walt, it's me. It's Carrie. He was like, you fight too much. I saw your fight on Fox. I don't want you fighting like that. I want you boxing. And I was like, I literally when I woke up to tell me this, he screamed at me, his 90-year-old. But I could hear his voice when I was in there, just thinking he would be screaming at me for like fighting, like, going toe to toe, sitting in the pocket when I don't have to. I'm a boxer puncher. But when you think, oh my God, I only have 2-minute rounds to leave an impression on the crowd, and you're an entertainer. Like, I feel like I'm not just there to get W's. I feel like I'm an entertainer, and I don't want people bored. I don't want you to see, okay, I'm jabbing and moving, but I don't have the time like Muhammad Ali. I can jab, move, and use my feet and be slick, but I don't have that extra minute to spare to like look for that shot. Sometimes you gotta just scrap.
You mentioned that you're an entertainer. For somebody who says that they don't have enough time in 2 minutes, I was there in the building, and our show also covers pro wrestling. So I seem to remember seeing a few times in that fight, particularly around a certain bolo punch where I heard a Ric Flair woo come out that I thought was from the crowd until I realized, no, Kara is just having fun and just letting them go at this point. So tell me about that, number one. And were you doing that knowingly or was that subconsciously?
So here's the thing. I feel sometimes I'm a bit of an ass when it comes to sports. Like I've always, like even when I played volleyball for the University of Windsor, and I mean, I used to like to just make people look bad. Like it was even in boxing, it was never like in my head, oh, I want to hurt someone, I want to hit someone hard. I was like, I just want to make them look so dumb. It's just like joyful for me just to be slick, you know? I mean, you're talking about an athlete, like a basketball player that's doing some sweet, slick moves that just leaves you in the dust. And so when I started getting my groove, that's when I'm there, when I'm like, saying woo, and I'm like making them miss and making them pay and in and out and like making faces and like shuffling. That's when I'm like in my zone, and that's what I love what I do. Like I'm not that fighter you're gonna see like if you watch the Canelo fight. Like I'm not gonna be there with my hands up and it's just like strategic, like I punch, you punch, I'm gonna slip. Like it's gonna be some entertainment value. I mean, we watch a lot of 80s wrestling in my house, so there's a lot of Ric Flair.
Oh shit, you've opened
Rick
the
Rude
can of
and all
worms.
these guys.
Do you see what's behind me at this point? And if I turn my camera, there's a picture of me and Flair up there in a corner. I mean, you have opened a can of worms. That just answered my question. Did it have any Ric Flair influence? And yes, it had Ric Flair influence.
And it's funny because we do this stuff nonstop in the house. Like the boys are just always doing these wrestling moves and dropping elbows. And I mean, it's just a part of us here. So it's like they're ridiculous, right? So yeah, we just literally were at the store yesterday looking for Halloween costumes, and we found a Ric Flair like WWE figurine. I was like, what? You can't find these? So yeah, thought it was very fitting after that fight I just had.
Yeah, man. Good Lord. So that's pretty funny to hear that, number one. Because you said you watched a lot of the 80s stuff. I could totally see it with the showman side of fighting. So with that being said, Ric Flair, who were some of your favorites as a kid?
You know, I didn't watch it much as a kid. When I was in my 20s, I actually liked Rey Mysterio because I liked the like almost Cirque du Soleil-esque kind of moves. Yeah. That was kind of the cool stuff for me. But like, oh yeah, back there. But yeah, I mean, we have to see the ridiculous, like my spouse, he's all about it. He watched so much of that. I mean, he does the stupid, like he'll walk by us and be like, and like the sweat on you, stupid stuff. Like this is my house,
rig, dude.
Yeah, all fighting and wrestling in this house, right? So
I love it. I love it.
And my son has started like when he was probably 3. This was his move.
Oh boy, hitting him with the Val Venus and the Rick Rude, man. Look at that.
Ridiculous. Yeah. So
look at the mark that wrestling.
That's what I liked. That's what I like to see. You know, you were talking about, you know, being an athlete from Canada and all the different things you could do. I was gonna say, man, you know, we all know that Canada comes out with quite the wrestler. So, I mean, I was going to say if boxing didn't work, I mean, it sounds like you got the showman part down. I mean, you know, wrestling's always a good option being from Canada.
Yeah, I could probably, because I'm an announcer too, maybe I could just do the 2-for-1. I'll be the ridiculous announcer and do some of the moves.
There you go.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to be back in the ring and I'm happy to entertain. And it felt like I didn't feel like I had been out for 11 years, right? It just felt like go in there, have fun. I was at the point like, don't worry about what anyone thinks. Because I feel like this community, maybe because I've put so much into both Windsor and Detroit, whether it was in the fighting world or community, involvement. I felt like I was going to be loved no matter what happened. And so that was helpful too, going into it, like not even kind of worrying about, just go in there and have fun. And once you go in there and have fun and enjoy what you're doing, I mean, that just changes the whole game.
Well, I can talk from somebody who you coached. I mean, you helped out a ton of us. So, I mean, I mean, I don't think there was anybody here or in Canada that was going to be against you that night. That girl was pretty much walking into home field advantage for sure.
Yeah.
Were you nervous at all to get back in there?
Pardon me?
At any point, were you nervous at all to get back in there?
I think before I said yes, I think I was nervous this entire time, like to have that as a possibility. And then once I said yes, it was just, I just kept staying focused. I think that was the biggest thing. And I was really surrounded by good people. That was another thing. And I mean, usually the week of, I'm looking back, and I think I was like, boxing's very dog eat dog world. And this time I was really around what felt like family, like training together. It just felt different. And then I took on the MMA strategy of water loading, and that changed my entire life, entire perspective, like to cut weight and feel energy. And I mean, boxing's so old school, you know, you don't rest, and you don't drink water, and you don't don't eat this. Whereas MMA, I feel like is a different science to it. And like when I first was told that you have to drink a gallon of water a day, I'm like, oh my God, it's a gallon. You know, I'm Canadian. What's a gallon? Like, so it's almost 4 liters, right? So I'm like, that's a lot, dude. So like once we incorporated some of those things, and I had to cut weight like an MMA fighter, like in a hot tub and in a steam room and lay down with a sauna suit on, sweating like crazy. I mean, everything was different. It was one day of, you know, hell, but other than that, the other training was good because of the water loading and stuff. So I
like that cut better?
Pardon me?
Do you like that kind of cut better?
Oh my God, it's night and day. It's night and day. Instead of just not eating for a week or 2 weeks, you know, it was night and day difference. And I mean, just the fact of feeling good the day up. I mean, I have a like partially torn Achilles. I had busted my hand the Monday before the fight, and I didn't use my hand the whole week because I couldn't use it. I couldn't even touch it. And I was like, just wrap that sucker up. Let's go. I'm not even pulling out of this fight, right? And I still felt great. So, I mean, once I took my glove and my boot off, I was like, oh, hello. I had like massive swelling everywhere. But, you know, that was like still the night of the fight. I still felt great, you know? You know, the
adrenaline's a hell of a thing, ain't it?
What's that?
I said adrenaline's a hell of a thing, ain't it?
Right? The best. The best.
Well, you brought up something that. Go ahead, Corey.
I was just going to say, you brought up kind of some other things that MMA had helped transition into your return into boxing. What other points do you feel like, whether it be during the fight, during the training camp, or whatever the case be, that the MMA side of the world has helped your now boxing side?
I got to figure out how to say this without insulting anyone, but I feel like I feel like when I'm training athletes, I would have to say my hardest workers would be wrestlers. Like, and then when you hear about their background and what their wrestling practices are like, it sounds like an absolute nightmare, but it makes these guys like untouchable in terms of hard work. And so I felt like the MMA community has, you know, such a variety of people from different martial arts backgrounds, but so many, like, you don't find people, it's like the no excuse territory. I found, like, I felt like in boxing, there's a lot of people make a lot of excuses, it seems. And you don't want to get caught up in that, because it's very easy to fall in that trap of like, oh, okay, well, justifying, oh, I can't train today because I have this, or I have this. And I feel like I've seen, like in the MMA gym, I've seen guys, we put toes and fingers and noses back in and just like, hey, let's go back on the mat, you know? And I've done that. Like, I've been coaching, and of course Daron kicked my leg out or something, right? And so I like literally wrapped my ankle back together because it like dislocated, popped it back in, and just kept going. And it's just like, it's just a different mindset. Like, it's a no excuses. Also, when I'm doing a lot of pads with these guys, and I'm catching knees and elbows and everything, then when you think, okay, well, I don't have to worry about hands. It's kind of a different mindset too. I'm only focused on these two weapons. So there's a lot of different elements, even like the way they cut weight and the way they stagger practices. I just felt like it gave me a little bit of a different look of what I had been seeing for years.
In all the years you've been training all of us MMA guys and all that stuff, I mean, I came from straight boxing before I went over to MASH anyway, but for so many of your fighters being MMA fighters, I mean, was that ever a thought? Like, you ever think about fighting MMA ever with wanting to get back in a ring?
Well, like, I would say 15 years ago, my best friend, James Lee, he's a pretty well-known guy in our community in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And he had actually
happy birthday,
initially,
sir.
Yeah, happy birthday. He had talked to me. He really wanted me to do MMA at the time because like women were just starting to come in, and he was like, "With your hands, you will kill it. We'll just teach you a few other things, like, more like Chuck Liddell style, like sprawl.
You would have
and brawl,
totally,
let's
you
go."
could have totally
Oh,
been the
oh,
female
man.
Chuck.
Yeah.
So that's what it would have been back then, right? Like just sprawl, brawl, scrap, stand up, sprawl. That's what we had worked on. But at the time, like my back injury was so bad that I did one like kickboxing and one session like with John Toth just to do some jujitsu. And I loved it. Like when I did that one with jujitsu, it kind of like was the addiction like boxing for me because it's all strategy. It's like you do this, I can do this. I have 4 moves here. You do like it was really fascinating when you were learning it. But at the time, my back was just too severe. I couldn't do it. And so, I mean, he says it all the time. Like, if you would have just fought, then I'm like, I couldn't. Like, I had 2
If
bulging
you
and a
would just
herniated
fought,
disc.
the
I
hell
was
with
like,
the training, just get in the cage.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But like, you see the girls now, and it's so different. You can't get away like Chuck. I couldn't do the Chuck Liddell now. I mean, it's just too diverse in terms of like the jujitsu level and things like that. It's not the same as it was. And once you're around MMA, like you see the amount of work jujitsu is, the amount of work the grappling is, the amount of like the learning. I mean, I have too much respect for the sport to even suggest that I could just go in the cage and kill
Just
it.
destroy somebody.
Yeah. No, I mean, they're shooting for, I am tall.
You
for
know
my
what
weight.
time it is,
They
and
just-
anybody that's got half a brain and looks you up is going to say, well, I know what I don't want to do. Like, let's not
Yeah.
fight on the feet. I'm going to shoot a double leg as soon as
Yeah.
possible.
And there's a lot of athletes, you've seen them in the male or female, they're going to eat some shots to take you down. So even if you get them on the way down, you're still going down there. So yeah, I mean, I really respect what they all do too. So I would even suggest that like, yeah, let me just cross over and do that. And plus those girls, I like, it's kind of surreal to me. Like some of them walk around at like 165, 160 and make 35. I mean, they walk around at 150 and make 15. I'm like, my body just is not going to do that. No. It's
Look,
pretty
the weight
some of
that
the-
I fought at when I was 16, which was the last, well, no, yeah, 16 or 17 was the last boxing fight I took. And the weight that I fought then, even though that was only, wow, shit. Wow, that was 14 years ago now. Fuck. But no, man, I couldn't make that weight now if I tried, because especially with me having Crohn's, like that was the thing. That was one thing you mentioned with the MMA weight cut versus boxing, because like you said, the way I used to do it before I came to MASH, we would just, you would put like trash bags on, or you would put a hoodie and sweatpants on, and you would spar, or you would hit mitts, or whatever the deal.
Yeah.
And man, good Lord, I couldn't imagine, like, after I found out I got Crohn's and that got worse, I was like, holy hell. The idea of cutting weight after that changed like the way I thought about all that stuff. So I could only imagine, the difference seeing that with MMA and all that. But one thing that you've mentioned a couple times that I wanted to ask about, because I think that it has a big thing to do with why we see what we see from you in the ring, because like you said, for you, a lot of it is mental too. And a lot of that, I feel like getting to have trained with so many people from Crunk comes from, where you came from back in the day. What do you think it was about the training back then and that kind of thing that made so many people out of Crunk, have that mindset and have that dog in them, like we were talking about earlier?
Well, so you walk through these doors, right? And the walls are sweating, first of all. Like when you walk down there, this is the bottom of a basement of a community center, and the walls are sweating, and you take a step into that gym, and the first thing you hear is someone screaming fresh meat. Like that's your welcome. Like it's not like you're going to Bally's, or Good Life or what you guys have. And it's like, hi, welcome to, it's like fresh meat, get them in the ring, beat them up. And when you basically went in and you said, who am I boxing today? Right. And so, which meant you're just going in there, you're gearing up, you're sparring. There was no, like in MMA is so different, right? It's like you show up at 5, your class starts at 5, you start, skipping, or as you guys say, jump rope. So you do your skipping and then your shadow ball. Like there's a strategy and you're following what the coach says. You're going through kind of your lesson plan, and Boxing's freestyle. You go in there and it's like kind of crabs in a bucket. It's like you go in there and you box whoever they put you with, and if you get them, if they can't hang with you, they'll put someone else in there for you. It's just so different, right? So it's like survival of the fittest. So you have to dig deep and man up so that you can just stay there and hang with these people. And so the other thing is, like, when you have it's like any sport, when you have really good teammates, you get better. Like, I remember, I'll never forget, this one guy used to box, John Jackson. I mean, he was lightning fast. And I remember one day, finally, my tempo matching his. And I was like, yeah, let's go. Because it was like, it's so exciting. Like, you start to pick up on it's the same. The opposite is the same too. You can be in a fight and someone's slowly moving because they're like hypnotizing you. Like, they're slowing you down so they can break on you. Right. And so, that's what you saw there. You had people that were strong and people that were fast and people that were crazy talented and people had crazy good range. So you were being exposed to all these really exceptional athletes, right? So everyone just got better. We made each other better. Like, I remember going to a ringside tournament, which was the biggest tournament basically in the world. And I mean, we brought 23 guys and there was like 18 of us came home with like belts. And if you didn't have the belt, then you came second. Like, it was just, when you sparred too, when you went down a Kronk, not only is Bam, like one of our guys at the side, yelling fresh meat, everyone is standing around the ring screaming at you. Like, let's go, let's go, let's go. Like, it wasn't people off hitting the bag, this. Everyone's standing waiting for their turn to get in there. It's 80,000 degrees. It was just a different scene, right? You had to just keep grinding to survive. So, and I could fight, thank God, because like I was in massive battles, because as soon as I hit someone with my right hand, like even with some of like my guys, friends, my teammates, and they think, okay, well, it's Kara, it's a girl. And then as soon as I hit them with the right hand, they said they just forgot that I was a girl and it was on. Like, so you had to be really tough to survive. And I get it. Like, I mean, everyone asked me, oh, you fight? Did you have brothers? And I was like, no. And I never understood, like, till I have a son now. And that's all he does is fight and wrestle. Yeah. But I'd seen like the guys that were my teammates. I mean, as soon as you pressed them, it was on. It didn't matter, right, that you were a girl anymore. So it would just,
only takes
it just
one.
It was an atmosphere that you can't even, like, it would have to be, you'd think it was in a movie because it didn't seem real, right? It was like that.
I just wanted to ask about that because so many people always ask, especially with us being from Detroit, about, Kronk and all those kind of things. And I tell people, because like I said, I started boxing when I was 13. So that would have been 2004, 2005. And like I said, it's just so different now from what you see, because so many kids now, like when I first started boxing, MMA wasn't as big as it was. So it wasn't like now where so many people are UFC. It's not even MMA, it's UFC. Like, oh, I want to do UFC. You know what I mean? Where back in the day, I feel like boxing was the more predominant. Like when I used to, like most kids, you talk about fighting with your grandparents or whatever. My grandpa, even when I did start training jiu-jitsu and all those things, because like I said, I started with boxing, he would be, for him, boxing was a real sport. He was like, oh, you got to do all that kicking and all that wrestling and blah, blah, blah. But yet now it's looked at as like, everybody looks at it as like the more popular of the fighting sports. But for you, what do you think? You mentioned Clarissa Shields and seeing her, come up as a kid and all that stuff. What are your thoughts on somebody like her and her foray over in MMA?
I mean, if you want to go do it, I mean, that, like, more power to you. For me, it's the whole element. Like I just don't have that interest. Right. And it's not because I don't like MMA. It's because I super respect it. And I think the girls, like, I would be probably, 25, 35 would be a bit heavy for me, but, and it's just, I'm not interested. We all know I'm 46, right? I am not interested in putting in the amount of time it would take to do some of the other elements of the martial arts. I just don't. I just love boxing. Like I love striking. Like when I watch UFC, I mean, when there's like high level jujitsu, it's really awesome to me. But I love watching the striking, like a lot of people do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference. I just kind of really love boxing more so than anything, and want to just focus on that for the end of my career.
Well, no, and
Well,
that's no, for you, I got you. I just meant seeing Clarissa come up. What do you think about her fighting over in PFL and then bouncing back and forth? Because I got to interview her at the end of last year, and she said that she still wants to, even though she's still got boxing fights on the tap, she said she still wants to be bouncing back and forth between MMA and boxing. And I'm just like, man, the different stances in that would be wild to me.
I don't feel like it's that different. I feel like if you have I feel like boxing and wrestling are the two killers for MMA. Like if you have a solid base in either of those, like I think you can move a little bit quicker up through the ranks. I don't find the boxing stance is too much of a difference in terms of, because I don't even like the way a lot of guys stand when it comes to MMA. If they have like a Muay Thai background, they're very square, or even like kicking background where their feet are all pointed forward, because you lose a lot of your footwork. So I don't know. I think she's young enough, and I don't think there's enough challenge at her level that she could just exclusively box. Like I think she's just going to run out of people. Like she's just going to, she's beating people and then she's going to have to rematch people. And I just don't see like the pool being that deep, like it would be maybe for a guy at that weight. So I think for her to be able to cross back and forth, it would be great, because then she can keep her career going. She's young, she works hard, so she can just keep learning to do the different elements, and who doesn't want to like watch someone who's an outstanding striker in the cage, right? So I think it's to her benefit to do both.
I like it. Corey, what'd you think, man? Because I know you're the diehard MMA guy, man. I know you're not. You've never been the biggest boxing guy.
Well, I actually was. I enjoy boxing, and I had there's layers of boxing that I enjoy, and then there's also aspects of it I don't. And mainly the aspect is the judging. I mean, I'm sure you can agree with me that some of these, especially the highlight cards, it seems like the A side gets very favorable decisions on these cards. But besides that, I was going to pose you a question just a minute ago.
Bazzy knows what time it is.
We talked about Clarissa.
We talked about that earlier, bro.
Michaela Meyer and all them. Did you see the bout that they just had canceled over in UK a couple weeks back?
Yeah.
What, other than the fact that we're seeing now that these women are getting to this point where they're headlining whole pay-per-view events and stuff that are built basically solely on, if I'm not mistaken, that was a whole women's card. Every single fight on the event was. What's your thoughts of from where you were at in women's boxing to your point where it wasn't about any type of making money, or it was about a dream of being a competitor and trying to be the best, competitor you can be, where now you're seeing whole pay-per-view events built around just women's boxing?
Yeah, I think it's really cool, to be honest. Like anytime you've been a part of the underground or like pioneering something and you don't really know you are, you just like grinding, right? You're trying to like represent women well. And that was always in my mind. Like I wanted to be so technical, and I wanted to be like represent women well. And I didn't want to just be like a brawler scrapper, because that's already what they thought of for women's boxing. I wanted to be slick and have this great jab and have great moves. And to see them on that stage, I mean, that's what everyone wants, right? You want women to get on that stage for the little girls to see, to be honest, because when I was a little girl, my dream was to be a professional athlete. I was this kid, like 5 years old, doing push-ups and sit-ups and squats before bed. And I was almost mad I wasn't a boy. Like I just wanted that opportunity to I just knew I wanted to be a professional athlete. I just knew I wanted to be an entertainer, and I knew I wanted to compete. And basically, from that point forward, it was women like, this is older now, but like, Steffi Graf, Martina Navratilova, all the women in Wimbledon really inspired me. And then Jackie Joyner-Kersee and FloJo and these women that were competing in the Olympics. It was like the first time I got to see women on TV, right? And so that was like massive for me. And so I know people, when you're in a minority, it's kind of like whatever minority you might be in, it's really cool when you get to see someone like you on TV doing it, when you think it's like not even a possibility, right? So for me, these women were massive. And now I feel like having women like that and headlining cards and at least giving them the opportunity to be on TV and showcase. I mean, even putting them in the Olympics was huge, right? So the first time they were in the Olympics was 2012. So I commentated the Olympics for Canada, and it was like I got a chance to commentate Clarissa. That was her first Olympics. And it was like, that's the first time they were in the Olympics, but they've been competing on a high level for a long time. So I just think the exposure is really important for a myriad of reasons for them to be on that level.
Well, you brought up something that I have to ask about. Obviously, as we're running our mouths on microphones right now, for a lot of the time that I got to know you and you were coaching me and some of the people that I was around, you were doing a lot of stuff, whether it be announcing fights, whether it be, commentating fights, you were at almost any local fight. I mean, you're one of the voices around here, whether it's Motor City, whether it's MMA fights, whatever the case is a lot of the time. Tell me about that. Like what got you into wanting to do broadcasting? Was it something that you always wanted to do? And what do you think, what do you think about doing that and being on the other side, being a fighter?
So I won a title in 2004 and 2005. And I think after 2004, I had been interviewed a lot of different radio stations, TV stations, much before podcasts and things like that. This is oil painting and cave drawings time. So basically, one of the broadcasters was interviewing me, and then he asked me, he's like, would you ever think about, like, you speak well, would you ever think about, interviewing other athletes? And I said, what do you have in mind? And he said, well, the Windsor Spitfires, I'd like a sideline reporter, which is our OHL team, right? For those that don't know, it's like it's kind of a farm system and feeder to the NHL. And I just thought, oh, well, that's weird full circle, because I got into boxing because of hockey and because like my boyfriend was in the OHL, signed with the Florida Panthers. They wanted him to be a fighter. And I was like, bro, you're like, I didn't say you're soft, but I was like, you can't fight. Like, you need to know. You got to go to a boxing gym. And so like I went with him, and that's how I got into it. So it was like so strange. I finally I win this title.
Speak
and
well for a Canadian.
See, my fighters just roast me. See, no one on the outside could ever say anything rude to me, because my fighters have said it, and we've said it all to each other. So basically I started interviewing, doing sideline reporting, and it started there. And then it turned into, I couldn't fight because of my back injury. And Carlos Linas was like, hey, can you do sideline interviews with the boxing? And then it turned into, can you announce? And then that just kept escalating. And I actually love, like, commentating is my all-time favorite. I enjoy announcing, but commentating, where I can break things down and analyze it. Because as you would know, like, I'm super picky as a coach. I'm very technical. I can break things down. I just get it. Like, for some reason, this sport, I never would have thought I would be a boxer when I was younger, but I get it. It makes sense to me. So I really enjoy commentating. That's one of my, I mean, not everyone enjoys me commentating, because sometimes they write me like, why do you hate me? Why did you say that about me? But I'm a truth teller, right? Like, what they should and shouldn't be doing. So
can I just say that every time I see you, the first thing I think of, and it's the funny, like, I'll never forget, I know who was around me, Rob Desiak and Sarah Boschetter, and we were at Fights at the Palace, and you were doing, what were you doing that night? You were doing the announcing, and I will never forget, and I can only imagine that you've gotten this like a million times in your commentary career. This dude started running his mouth about you being in the cage, and I don't know what he had said. And I turned around, I said, do you realize that she'd knock your dumb ass out in heels and not even fall in the process? And he just stopped, and he stopped and looked at me and just shut the fuck up and just didn't say a word. Like, just said, like, it wasn't even the fact that you were my coach, but I just was like, dude, will you shut the fuck up? Like, you have no idea, how often have you gotten that in your travels doing commentary and stuff?
Well, I mean, I think it's been worse. I know I've mentioned this to you before, but it's been worse, like cornering my guys at the UFC. I've been to several UFCs. I've probably been about 8 or 10 times. And it's always when they're trying to give out the wristbands, you have to be a fighter or a corner.
Mhm.
And it's basically trying to write down who I am. And they will guess and they'll say, oh, are you the girlfriend, the wife? Now, are you the massage therapist? Are you the nutritionist? Are you the chiropractor? Like, I never get striking coach, right? They never think, okay, this female is here. And I've been to UFC about 2 or 3 times pregnant, so that didn't help. But and so, and they've always trying to list me and put me in these categories. The worst part recently, though, the 2 of my fighters I've gotten is this
Here
your
we go.
mom. So now I know I've crossed over. Is this your
boy.
mom?
Oh.
So I was doing,
Oh
we
no.
were doing this like massive show. It was like, I don't know YouTubers very well, but like the KSI Logan fight, and it was
Okay.
at Staples Center, and I had Josh Bruckner, who's like, he was my MMA fighter, but he's also
Past
this
guest of the
massive
show.
he's a massive YouTube star, right? The KD vlogs or JD vlogs.
That's fucking insane, by the way.
Yeah. So they're like massive, right? He messaged me. He's like, hey, I've got this boxing fight at Staples Center. I need you to corner me. I'm like, I'm not cornering you. Just like train with me because you're not making me look bad, kind of thing, right? And so he was like,
You ain't got putting my name on it looking like shit.
no, I'm not signing off on that, right? And so he basically said, listen, they're not going to approve me to fight unless you're my corner because of like my experience, right? He needed to have somebody with experience. And I was like, okay, you got to be in the gym like these days. We got to get some work done. And then when we went there, it was like insanity because I didn't know who Logan Paul was. Like, I didn't know who I don't watch these shows, right?
Right.
And so we go there and it's like insanity, like complete insanity. And so Josh, we go up and Michael Buffer's announcing, who I've announced with, and who's like tremendous. He's my favorite. Like, he just the most buttery voice, perfect. And so we go up there and then we go to fight and we're in the back getting ready. And this is this KSI and Logan fight. And the place is shaking. Like, because it's like young kids screaming. It's like I'm at a Taylor Swift concert, screaming high pitch. And just completely insane, building shaking. And we go out, and when the commentators were talking, and they're just like, oh, and they're British commentators, and they're like, oh, I think that's his mom. And I'm like, this going on, and I'm like, okay, let's settle down with the mom, okay?
Oh my god.
Yeah, so
You just gotta get you a shirt. Get you a shirt that says "Not the mom."
not the mom.
You know.
So yeah, I mean, I get everything. But like you said, even in there might be times with announcing or commentating if someone were to say something, but other people like look at them and be like, you don't want to like, I wouldn't. With
You don't
her.
want no smoke, bro.
Well,
You don't want the smoke, bro.
Announcing could be one thing to come to assumptions, right? Like if you see a pretty lady in the stage with the microphone, you're like, what's she actually know about fighting? But when you're commentating, right, to your point, especially with the technical background and stuff, you would think, you would pass that border at least in that regard,
Yeah. A lot of times I'd be surprised. Oh, she knows a lot. Well, yeah, I've been doing this for 25 years. I mean,
Right.
Kara, you're a damn encyclopedia. But
Yeah.
with you being an encyclopedia, we mentioned Bazzy, who happens to be a past guest of the show back in the podcast Detroit days. Shout out to Dave, RIP, and all that good stuff. What up, though, Mickey? With that, congrats on the W.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that brings up a question for me. So, most people have been seeing you coach, when it comes to like the MMA guys. We mentioned Daron, we mentioned Bazzy, we mentioned Cody, we've mentioned all these names. Tell me a little bit about how tough was it for you to start training MMA guys, and like what was the hardest thing? Obviously kicks changed the game for you, but I mean, obviously it's changed the way you hold pads, and I'd imagine it changes even things with your boxing fighters as well.
You know what it was? Like I strictly was doing hands at the beginning in footwork because footwork is kind of my specialty. I was doing hands, and so basically we had a fight, and Daron went to Ryzen to fight, and I watched the fight, and I remember my spouse saying, damn, he's not using his kicks. Like that's like, he's probably one of the best kickers in the world. I mean, he's just a tremendous athlete, but like beautiful kicks. And then I instantly, like as a coach, sometimes you feel like a parent, like you feel like something's your fault if it goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, like, when he said that to me, it hit me really hard because I was like, damn, he works with me exclusively. Like he works with his dad and he works with me. And I'm like, I am a boxing coach. Like, damn it. Like, this is like, I felt like it was my fault. Right. And so after he came back from that fight, I literally, it sounds insane, I watched a million YouTube videos. I also, like, my spouse had done karate, and I like studied and studied and studied so I could learn kicks, because I was like so afraid, like, for me to be responsible for any of my athletes, like not using their other gifts, like their kicks and things like that. And so I learned how to kick. I learned how to knee, elbow, all of these things, spinning back fist, like all of this stuff, so that I can incorporate. If you see my pad work, it's like, it's all like, you know, kicks and elbows and knees and spins and incorporating boxing and footwork. So it was really like, you know how like your athletes can make you better as a coach. And that's really what it was. Like, it made me level up as a coach so that I could like really provide for them a little bit more than what I was.
How much did the commentary end of things kind of like spark that itch for you now that you're back in the ring? Like, I mean, you've been doing commentary and all that stuff as long as I've known you. Hell, I've known you quite a long time at this point too. And you've been doing it as long as I've known you. So how much did that like kind of like poke and prick away at your mind? Like, damn, I want to be back in the ring.
I don't think the commentating really did it. It was the more the coaching, because like when I hold pads and I throw back, it just made me feel like, God, I can still do this. And my eyes are really sharp. And when you do a lot of pads, your eyes get super sharp because you're so used to seeing punches come at you. Like as you saw in the fight, there's a few times she was throwing a punch and I was like, oh man, I have like 8 minutes to slip that shit. Let's go. Come on. Like, you know, I was used to, because I'm seeing punches come at me. I'm holding my hands like this all the time and catching and throwing and attacking. So it's always felt like, God, it's right there. And once I really started, like Daron and I would do pads and we were almost in a sparring session, I was like, what am I doing? Why don't I just, you know, I want to do this anyways. Let's go. Let's just get going on it, you know? And I mean, having him was great because like, if you notice, like a lot of women when they fight, I mean, it's different than guys. Like I fight traditionally more like a guy, like with the jab and the setup and the long one too, whereas the girls, like, so a lot of head dropping and like looping up and, you know, more wild, and you see that more often in MMA. So for me, it's like working with Daron on it, he could bring me the best of both worlds. Like he can box because I've been working with him forever, but he also can bring in that element of like surprise, which is what you see with, you know, the girls, where it's like a haymaker that you don't, it's not traditional. And it's always been harder. Like I trained with guys, and when I was at Kronk, it's like everyone was perfect. And then I would get in the ring and I was like, what sport am I in? Like, what is happening right now? Because these are like literally haymakers from their hips, you know, like I had a bruise on my hip Friday night from her head. Like in no way of boxing should your head ever be in that location. Yeah. You know,
so that's why you were really going for the bolo punch. You were doing it out of necessity. It wasn't because you was trying to show out. You were doing it because of necessity. See, I got your back. See, I knew what time it was. See,
no, I'm always trying to show off because I like the slick stuff.
An entertainer, man.
But for real, like it's awkward, right? And it's really hard to prepare for, because when people are throwing straight punches and you learn how to counter, you learn how to slip, and you're expecting punches to come in a certain direction. Sometimes you're in a bar fight and you're just like, what's happening right now? So it's working with MMA. You've seen it a lot. You see it a lot more in that sport than you do in boxing, you know? So that's helpful for me to be around it.
If it's any consolation, you know, having gotten to train with you for so long, it was pretty dope to see you hit those overhand rights that I've heard you preach about for like years, like getting your head off the center line and ripping an overhand right, which I saw you sock her in the temple like quite a few times, like just like I've heard you yell about, I don't know how many times. But with that being said, you know, with you having this first fight, you know, like what's the game plan? What's the mindset? Like, I know you said you want to fight more. Like, how often are you trying to fight? Do you have like a number of fights in mind you want to do, or are you just full blown just taking it as it goes?
Yeah, I didn't really look past this fight too much because I wanted to see how it went, how much it impacted my family. I'm really involved with my kids. So I didn't know how much that would take away. Cause when you're sore and tired all the time, it's tough. And it's tough when you're like trying to take a nap and your son's like, let's build a Hot Wheels rack all the way across the, and I'm like, oh my God. So I just didn't know.
Not today, man.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I got 2 little
Yeah.
girls. It might not be boys, but I know the feeling.
Yeah, and I mean, little girls are moody, so it's like then you're dealing with like if you want to take a nap or do something else, it's like it's tough, right? Because I want to be the best mom and the best coach and the best athlete, so it's tricky to make those divisions, but I do want to like fight again. I really wanted to see how this went, and I had a really bad Achilles injury, so I wasn't able to do as much as I wanted to. Like I could push off, you can weight bear completely on it. So it's like I would like to see that be completely healed and even like make someone else look even sillier. Like that's really the goal. But no, like I'm moving forward, I got the message the next day, like, hey, what's next? What do we want to do? And there's talks. I know that we have another fight at the casino December 23rd. But if something comes before that, that might be a possibility too. So we'll see. This week I wanted to take off, but I had too many athletes like depending on me. So I was right back in the gym on Monday. So I'm still kind of sore from just not getting the rest. But I pretty much came out of it uninjured. I mean, like you have my face.
Bumps and bruises.
Yeah, no bruising. Just it was a little sore.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, couple sore spots. Yeah, no bruising.
Yeah, I just meant from training. I mean, I feel like training in the camp is always worse than 90% of what happens in the ring, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the injuries came before I even went into the fight, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's very rare to find a fighter that is actually entering a fight fully healthy. And we're always contending with something. I mean, I remember, and then, like I said, when my trip to Auschwitz, like changed kind of my mindset and a lot of things, but I also saw this reel the one day and it was like Kobe ran over to the corner and had the doctor reset his finger because it was out and it was like all crooked sideways. He's just like, oh, and then he just jumped back on the court. And I'm just like, yep, that's the real deal right there, right? No excuses. You just gotta suck it up and forge on. And that's kind of all these like little bits I feel like help push me forward.
K-Ro the gangster, you already heard it here first. She said the Kronk mindset, man. That you already got it down. Well, with that being said, we talked about your return. We talked about what's next. I gotta ask your opinion on this because we've had quite the assortment of bare knuckle FC fighters on lately. We just had your new 115 champ, Britton Hart, was on here a couple weeks ago with us. Your 125-pound champ, Christine Faria, was on with us recently as well. What do you think about bare knuckle? Have you gotten to watch much of it? How do you like watching it if you have? And, man, we were talking about this when we had Britton on. Somebody like a Joe Riggs or a lot of the more cleaner boxers than the guys that have come over straight from boxing are just murking people because of the head movement and being able to throw hands. So what are your thoughts on bare knuckle, and have you checked it out at all?
Welcome to Fighting Girls. Like that's literally what it is. It's not like it's the haymakers, it's the offline shots. I mean, that's why when like pure boxers go in there, when you pure box, there's almost like an etiquette to it. Like, whereas when you have these people that are wild, it kind of throws everything off, right? You'll see these, even in boxing, the odd time you get a really wild guy, like they may beat a top contender because it's just, you're seeing shots come from everywhere. Bare knuckle
like
is
Emmanuel Burton.
Yeah.
Deontay Wilder.
Yeah.
That too.
Yeah. Loading them up.
Yeah. But what's funny about Deontay, like I've trained heavyweights and they're like, but if that sucker lands, it's like like a brick, it's rough. But I mean, bare knuckle, I've been to a couple events and it's rough. And this sounds crazy. I don't like violence. And It sounds so insane. Like before I got into boxing, I used to see it on TV and be like, why would a network put this on? It's so like violent. But when you learn it and you learn the strategy, like you see it completely different. So when I watch bare knuckle, it's rough because I mean, I know what it was like when I would hit people with 8-ounce gloves. I don't think I had a fight where I didn't drop somebody when I was wearing 8s. Like to have no gloves whatsoever is so rough. I have been in the back afterwards and seen people come out of the fights, and it was like, for me, it was like a horror show. Like looking at people like, oh, dude, get that stitched. Like you have stuff coming out of your face that shouldn't be there. So, I mean, these people. It's one of those where I mean it's 2-minute rounds like we would have, right? But it's just I don't know, the girls they're tough. I just it's a different style. It's a different style. You know, like it's no joke when you take one of those shots. Like that's the problem. I know that we had signed up for one with Daron Cruickshank, but then when we found out more about the rules, it was just like it was an open. There was no ring. There was no fence posts. It was just open. Boy. Like I think it was Ken Shamrock, and it was just open. And one of the rules was you.
Oh yeah, he's got like the Kumite mat looking thing for his. His is just like his doesn't have anything. Like there's no ring, no nothing.
Like blood sport type style.
Yeah, like literally, it looks just like that. Like literally, his mat is like even kind of like if you remember from the movie, it's literally even like almost kind of like bent in the middle, sort of. So it's literally almost identical. Yeah.
And then there was like you couldn't block or parry. So like a block is you stop a punch, a parry is like a redirection, right? And we were just like, so you want us to just use our face to block? Like what's happening? Like,
so you just gotta eat punches. Like
not get hit?
What does that
we were just like, no, we're good.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's a particular style of athlete that's good for. We know Josh Burns from Michigan is bare knuckle boxing.
Past guest of the show.
I mean, I thought that was a great selection for him because his cardio has always been a little bit like underwhelming, but he has skills and he's tough, and so I was like, that's kind of perfect for him in terms of like just. You have a shorter window of time and just get it done, like hit somebody hard, right? So, yeah, I watch it if it's someone that we know, but I still watch it like that.
I could only imagine. I just wondered what you thought with like I say with the way boxers are just even Joe Riggs, who's an MMA guy, but has always been known for his hands because he boxed too. Like he's just been running through dudes since he went over there, and it's been pretty to watch because most of them. He's catching them on these nasty counters, and you're just hearing the sound when he's clocking these dudes. Just like, damn, like, it's like the fight night type shit.
It's like a lot of things, like stylistic matchups, right? It's just styles that go in there, and some can do well, and some just they may be great in another sport, but it just doesn't suit that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Kara, I appreciate your time, and I am so glad we finally got to do this. You know, getting to have you on here, getting to have Don on here, getting to have different people that I've gotten to train with along the way. You know, speaking of James will have to come through one of these times as well, man. Like I said, it's been cool to get to have you on here, especially with the timing, getting to be there at your fight and all those things. So I appreciate you coming on and messing with us. So if you got anything you got to plug or anything like that, feel free.
No, I mean, I just want to especially thank like my team. I coach at Michigan Top Team, but like they all came. I mean, I think I had 25 guys on the mat on Wednesday night, and I like probably maybe 2 of them weren't at the fight, and that's because they were underage. Like they just been so incredibly, supportive. It's been awesome having, Daron flip the script and he became the coach. I mean, he was amazing. Anthony Barnes was amazing because I got to get back to my roots of like Kronk and our style, and then the grittiness that came from like MMA and the water loading and the weight cut. I mean, it was like probably my favorite fight experience that I've ever had, which is crazy.
Wow.
I've had like any coach that you can think of that's top of the line. I've had them, whether it's Emmanuel Stewart or Javen Sugar Hill, Chris Johnson in Toronto, who's a bronze medalist for Canada at the Olympics, like Chad Weigel, who's with Team USA, like it's just surreal, the coaches that I've had, and as you mentioned, Dave as well, Dave Lester, who's passed. But I mean, I've just
R.I.P.
had
Showtime.
so many great coaches, and I mean, I think it was just the culmination of all of that together, just giving me a chance to shine. And I appreciate you guys all going to the fights.
No, I could not go. Once I heard you were fighting it, first of all, I didn't know until like late that you were fighting. Second of all, once I found out you were fighting, I'm like, shit, who do I know off the top of my head that I know is going to be there? So I immediately thought of Ethan and I called him. I'm like, yo, are you about to be at this fight real quick? So I literally, and this shows you, and Corey can tell you, I went out solo. I left right from work. I worked in Ann Arbor Friday and then drove down from Ann Arbor back down to the city. Went and checked out the fight and then got up and went to work the next day. So I definitely was down to check that one out. It was cool to get to see you in action after, getting to train with you and all that. Like I said, but when I started training with you, you had either just stopped fighting or were getting ready to stop fighting. So like I said, it was cool. It was cool to get to see you in action again.
Thank you. I mean, Motor City was cool for me because I announced there every time, right? So it didn't even feel like, there's a few thousand people there, but like it didn't, I'm so used to being in front of the crowd with the mic that I didn't even they're taking me through the crowd. I didn't even feel the pressure, which I should have, right? But it was just so chill. It just felt like home and family and support. So it was really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. Well, last question before I let you get out of here, though, because I know he's watching it because he just had liked the post. Jared Brooks, one of your fighters, is getting ready to do his thing with ONE FC. So tell me, how do you see this fight going and stuff? Because Jared has been making some noise over there over there in Japan.
Yeah, I think he found his place where he's appreciated, and I think that's really awesome. He's the strongest man on the planet. Ask anyone. He's the smallest but strongest man on the planet. This grip strength, and he just seems to have found his groove, and he found the place to be, right, where he could really shine. It's unfortunate because I think he belongs in the UFC, and I think he's at that level of all those guys, but I think he's found a place to make his mark. And I think that sometimes what you have to find is the place that you're truly appreciated and you're getting a chance to shine, and he's doing that, and I'm so happy for him.
Yeah, as a fight degenerate as I like to always call myself, I feel like ONE FC has done an amazing job of building up their respect level, I guess you can say, amongst the American fans, of whether it's them starting to implement the $50,000 bonuses or just the way that they treat their fighters, at least publicly from what the fans are able to see, they seem to do a very good job.
They put on a great show. Every time he's fought there, we've tuned in, and you watch these fights and they are killer. There's not, you're not seeing the star and an opponent. You're seeing two killers, high level, just go at it. And the skill level is through the roof. I love it. I really enjoy, whether it's just they'll throw, the Muay Thai fight or an MMA and they mix it all up. And just the level, the skill level is so tremendous.
And you mentioned the wrestling end of things. You said we talked wrestling earlier. The one thing I like that I've always said that I wish the UFC would get back to implementing again. If you remember in the early days of the UFC, they had the big ass entrance and all that stuff. I always thought that was really cool. ONE has a little bit of an element of that. Rizin has had a little bit of an element of that. I would love to see one of these promotions in the States get back to some shit like that, because I just feel like it makes it look so much more cooler.
It's the pageant.
Right?
I mean, it's cool.
But the couple of times I've been to Rizin and went to Japan, it was just, it's really funny because you have a light show and you have fireworks and you have music and you have their pictures and they all come out in the beginning and they introduce each one of them, and it's a spectacle. It's tremendous. And then there's no talking or clapping during the rounds. The entire crowd is quiet.
Wild.
It's so surreal. And when you're coaching, you can completely hear yourself because your athlete can hear you. You don't hear anyone else. And it's just golf clapping in between. But these fans are through the roof. They're tremendous. We're on the streets and getting stopped, for pictures and stuff like that with the fighters, and they're just it's really cool. It's just a different level of how they appreciate their athletes over there. It's really neat.
Yeah, it's so weird. You would see, just to flashback real quick on that last ONE FC card when they did the Amazon ONE FC on Amazon one they wanted to call it one 40 times. But it was a great event, but you could see the crowd in the background, but the only way you could see them is they all had these little wristbands that were like lighting up different colors throughout the event. And it was weird because you're like, you could tell that the atmosphere was like, to your point, a big fight feel and everything like that. But yet it was almost silent at almost every given point throughout all these fights. And you would see like these tremendous Muay Thai bouts and stuff like that. And these guys are just swinging for the fences and stuff. And the crowd's just like, and it's like, crazy. It must be such a surreal culture flip from seeing all the fights over here to the aspect of that over there. It's just wild.
Yeah, you could tell when someone wasn't from Japan because they would be loud, and it was like, you're not allowed to do that here. It's not appropriate.
Oh, you're one of us. You're not from here.
Yeah.
J-Bone, we talk about that all the time with New Japan, like in the wrestling side of things. Like you always hear a lot of guys talk about. Ninja Mac talks about that. Kara, I know you probably don't keep up with today's wrestling, so if you listen to anything I tell you, go back and check out one of our past guests. This guy Ninja Mac does a bunch of crazy shit and actually has a wrestling background, all that kind of stuff. The reason I bring that up is because he's wrestling in Japan right now. And when he came on the show, he was like, dude, all the stuff this guy does in the ring, and these people are just like super quiet. No clapping, no nothing. And it's just it's crazy to see the way things are different in Japan. And I mean, like I said, with the entrances, I mean, hell, Jared's the perfect person for it. I mean, the monkey god,
Yeah, it gives you an opportunity, and I think that's cool because it gives you opportunity to have that character, right? Like then these guys can actually make money selling merchandise or t-shirts or something else, after fighting, have something kind of that they can hang on to, their legacy.
See, I like it. And all this on the heels of talking about them damn rock shoes. But hey, man, talking about things that make you money. Shout out to our sponsors, G3 Payroll Tax and Accounting. Tell them Knockouts and 3 Counts sent you. I can tell you they got my taxes together. We're getting close to tax season. Hit up Jack and tell him Knockouts and 3 Counts sent you. And with that being said, I don't know, man. I think we've covered the gamut. We've talked about talking on microphones. We've talked about Cruickshank trying to blow Kara's leg out. We've talked about Ric Flair and bolo punches and the Ric Flair drip. It was, I feel like we've covered the gamut. This definitely can't be the last one. So if you step back in the ring, we'll definitely have to chat again soon.
Thank you. We've obviously covered the important things. So thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you.
No, greatly appreciate
Until next time and in the in-between time, peace.
Bye-bye. Peace.